AquaHacking. And I'm happy to have this as very much like a discussion, like we would almost person with humans. So if you ever have any questions, just pipe up. We're a pretty small group, so I think we can do that. And yeah, this is exciting. It's I also never thought I would be anywhere close to being an entrepreneur. I went and got a corporate job right out of undergrad, and it was in new product consulting. Realized that I hated it, and then went back to grad school and focused on water, and then have been working with water in various capacities ever since. So are we seeing my presentation? Awesome.
Yep.
Thanks.
Looks good.
It, that was pretty, so Jason throwing the thumbs up was exactly how I do it in all presentations that I'm in where people are presenting. So cool. So, figured we talk about what's next. So you've got this great idea, you've won some awards. AquaHacking trends more towards the concept stage versus the later stage of awards. So, what's next for everyone? And it's going to be different for a lot of us, but we can talk about some cool things and see what we can do to help out. And yeah, so usually you want to go for the path of least resistance. It's the water sector, so that means 7, 10, 15 years. How long have people been in the water sector for? I guess show of hands if it's more than 5 years. Or no. So yeah, so it's a long, hard slog. That used to be the first discussion I would have with anyone who was saying, oh, I've got this great idea for the water sector. And so when you're doing that, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong thing. But there's still a path of least resistance, and what matters for the water sector is usually your why. So has anyone heard of Simon Sinek and Start With Why? Jason has? No, okay. So it's a phenomenal book. I love book recommendations. And so I always ask for them and I always try and give them. Start With Why is really about understanding who and why you're doing something. And if a company knows that, people can buy from you. So people, the main quote from it is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Okay? So you always have to ask yourself, why am I here? Why did you enter AquaHacking? Why are you into water? I mean, there's so many other things that you can get into. Water is not necessarily always a great place for entrepreneurs, because if you look at energy, there's tons of money in that. Water's a hard slog. So you really have to know your why, especially as a founder or early employee of a company. Cool. So I figured I'd go with my why. My why is, I hate the fact that there are people on this planet that have to go walk for water, and I get it right in my tap. And that bothers me every single day, and I care about that. So what do I do about that? I got into the water sector. I used to work at a company called WaterTap. It was a provincial organization that helped water technologies get into the right people's hands. And so we worked with, essentially 30 to 40 high potential companies to help them grow in Ontario and then grow globally. And so that's how I got started in the water sector. Now what I do is I now help companies, and I found my sweet spot is I help companies that have a cool idea that are maybe early stage, they've sold it a couple of times, and then how do they transition that to a real company, to real growth? So some of these you may have seen or heard of. Most of them are Ontario based. Cool. So you've made it past the final of AquaHacking. What are you? Are you a research project? Are you a social enterprise? Are you a company? Are you something else? So is everyone here pretty much got a product or a company? No, okay, cool. So Laura, what do you have?
We're a nonprofit and a little bit of a moving towards a social enterprise, hopefully. We do have a product, but that's not like our main goal.
Awesome. Cool. And so there's lots of different avenues once you understand what you are. So, if it's research, it's student design. Oh, sorry, was anyone research? Okay, great. I don't know as much about that. So, if you're research, it's student design competition, finding the right advisors. For social enterprises, nonprofits, there's lots of resources out there. But if you're a company, there's a lot of different paths, accelerators, incubators, innovation hubs. They could all mean the same thing. They may be very different. And then, of course, talk to clients. That was one of the questions that we asked. The only way you can really find out what clients want is really by asking them. There is the Steve Jobs of we tell them what they want, and that worked great for Apple. It doesn't necessarily always work for everyone else. And when you do talk to clients, you then have to ask yourself, what value am I providing? So who knows what kind of value they're providing to their clients? We don't all have to speak up at once. Okay, so when you're talking,
Laura, did you want to chime in? I was just gonna try it. I mean, I'm speaking on behalf of Kat, and I haven't been at Water Rangers as long as she has, but I feel like the value we're trying to give people is a sense of empowerment about being able to protect waterways. So that's kind of how we frame our mission.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I actually have a question about that, because that's something I heard, like identifying the value you're providing to your client. That's something I heard be mentioned a lot in the conference sessions this week. What can that look like? Like, is it I'm saving them money, I'm offering to them like new opportunities or new perspectives? Like, I'm just curious to know, like, how, like, in what unit you can present that.
That's a great question. So there's really only three kinds of values you can provide. You're either saving them something, so it's saving them money, saving them energy, saving time. You're making more of, you're helping them make more of a product. You're helping them produce, more of a beneficial thing, or fulfilling a requirement. So a regulatory requirement, something that allows them to keep doing business. Basically a pass. So each of those is valuable. If you can save someone money, great. But sometimes people don't necessarily care as much about saving money, which I know that sounds a bit crazy, especially in the water sector. Even if you can save someone 20% on something, if they have to change a process, if they have to do more work themselves, that may not necessarily be a path that they want to go down. Because not only are they having to spend their money on this new thing, but they're then also having to spend their time, their effort, and if it doesn't work, they may not look the best. So there's an inherent risk when you talk about saving money, making more of why, until it's proven and things like that. Making more of why. So yeah, if you can help people make more of their product, they will generally like that, especially if it helps them make more money. And fulfilling a requirement, that's huge, because if it allows someone to continue to do business, if it allows a utility to continue to operate, that's huge. So that then leads to problem statements. So problem statements are a way of identifying the way you provide value. So, we help save energy by identifying toxic shocks to wastewater treatment plants. Has anyone here talked about problem statements with their, within their business, with their partners? Can anyone identify what you solve in a statement like that? Okay, no worries. We can keep going. We don't all have to be quiet.
I was just going to chime in and say, like, it's interesting with the AquaHacking Challenge, like, we present the problem statements to the participants, which are, informed by these discussions with local water stakeholders. But then often we see, you know, that team, whatever solution they're making or their product, you know, it changes, and so then they likely will have to create a new problem statement that, you know, that matches with their pivot. So so yeah, I wonder if anyone has had that experience. And
Yeah, I can. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just gonna talk about you know, the part of the pivoting. So I guess for us, it was quite easy because you know, it was kind of loose ends from what the problem was proposed initially. So, but talking more to the users, you know, the end users, helped us shape more of the problem.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'll speak for Above Atlantis as well. We went with flood risk communication, and what we ended up finding as we went through the process was that flood risk, like that, a lack of flood risk communication was more of a symptom of other existing problems, like a lack of baseline data, lack of funding, lack of you know, an understanding of urgency or preventative measure. And then we found that there were other problems that had to be addressed in different aspects before we could kind of you know, take a step back and see flood risk communication being addressed as a whole.
Awesome. And it looked like there were two others that were going to chime in.
I was going to say something where, like, Blue Lion, the company I'm part of, recently went through a pivot, and we're focused dealing more with fish farmers now. So still in the water space, but a different industry. And like, we were solving a problem, but we weren't able to capture value within by solving that problem. So we could save them potentially money. We could help them maybe fulfill a requirement, but that still wasn't enough for them to lay down a check. So I think, like, I think value-driven thinking is important, but it's bigger than just like, what problem statement am I solving? It's also, what's the threshold, or how big is that problem? Because, like, coming from an academic background too, there's 1,000,002 problems on this planet, and there's going to only be more, right? And like, academics can solve problems without any kind of commercial motivation, but from a business standpoint, there has to be that incentive for the market to pay. So that was just my reflection.
And I think that's a great point, because there are value thresholds. Because if you save someone 1%, that may or may not be worth it. It depends. If it's 1% off of $1 billion, that could be huge. If it's 1% off of $10,000, it may not meet a threshold. So 100% right, and it's how much value are you providing, and does that make economic sense? Because yeah, we can pretty much solve anything from an engineering perspective, but does it make sense? So awesome, that's a great point. So, and maybe I'll give an example of a pivot of one of the companies that I work with. So it's a microbiome sensor that initially when we deployed it, we thought it was going to make every utility super happy, because we were going to let them know what their effluent stream looked like. And so what were they dumping into rivers? Great. Now everyone will know. But no one will pay for that, because no one wants to know how bad they're doing or how much trouble they're getting into. But they will pay for putting the sensor at the front of their plant so that they know what they have to deal with. So once that switch was made, and you know, we had solved a brilliant problem, but we put it in the right place, and that's why the company is starting to take off. And so it's how can you find the right place for the right technology, and that's because if you've come up with a great idea, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're solving the right problems. So yeah, no, this is awesome. If anyone else wants to chime in, I'd be happy to hear.
Yeah, I can say something. So when Water Rangers entered the AquaHacking Challenge, they were mostly just an online platform. So for everyone to store their water quality data. And that was kind of the idea, to make this online repository so that everyone could share the data. And since it's all citizen science-based, after a while, we realized that people actually wanted tools so that they could gather that data themselves, because they didn't have access to those easy to use tools. And that's why there was a shift towards creating these test kits that were easy to use and we could sell to people and have another revenue stream on our end.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. Well, cool. So once you started figuring this out, once you're looking at that, there's also two ways to really look at how accelerators overall work, and sort of what I would assume is the next stage for a lot of these companies. And there's really two types of accelerators. And so one of those logos you should be familiar with if you participated in Imagine H2O, because it's Imagine H2O's logo. And then the other is the LIFT program. And so in the water sector, and probably in other sectors as well, but I don't know as much about them, there's really technology accelerators and commercial accelerators. So two paths. If you can do both in parallel, it's great, because you need to understand, you know, with technology accelerators, they'll really look at what are the nuts and bolts of the technology, how does it work, does it pass the smell test? You know, there's a lot of old people in the sector who have seen what they consider to be everything, and they'll give you a million reasons why something won't work, but usually they'll also give you a lot of reasons how to make what you have and how to make a good idea better. And so a lot of them will work at utilities. And then when you're going through a technology accelerator, the goal is end user focused, and then to get pilots and demonstrations. So of the companies out here, who's actually deployed anything in a live setting yet?
We have Nathan
Awesome.
can forecast.
Cool. And so with technology accelerators in the LIFT program, the reason I put them up is they're part of the Water Research Foundation. So it's a North American focus group that helps get them. And so can you tell me about the pilot? Where did you pilot? How did you get that?
So it was actually thanks to the AquaHacking competition. After we won the finals in 2016, we actually developed our prototype with data from the city of Montreal. And so when they saw that our model was performing better than what they had, they started talking to us about potentially having a contract, and that's how they gave us our first contract.
Awesome. Yeah, and so that's a great way. And once you have something like that, it's also good to check out technology accelerators to help refine and get even more input. With commercial accelerators, yeah, with commercial accelerators, it's all about, you know, investment, business plans, growth, and so you're speaking with a much broader range of audience. So investors, large tech partners, end users, and with them, that provides a broader perspective, but it also looks at, there's also very competing motivations. So with some of the large tech firms, you know, just throwing names out there like a Suez or a Veolia, they may have competing technologies, they may have looked at competing technologies, so they may be giving different types of advice with different agendas. But the goal with those is you figure out your business plan, you figure out your business model, and generally end up with some form of investment or way to move forward. Does that make sense?
I have a question, John, on so like we saw that some of the alumni members here, they're still working on, you know, like developing that product and service and refining it and prototyping it. But then we also saw that business expertise is often what's lacking within the team. So would you recommend, like, I think the majority of the participants here are coming out of our 2020 cohort, and so they'll be just coming out of the startup design competition. And so should they be targeting more so technology accelerators or commercial accelerators at this point?
Good point. It's a good question. If you have the bandwidth, I love the idea of being able to do them both at the same time. That being said, it usually, that's an ideal world. I find with tech accelerators like Lyft and that program, some of them are much more virtual, and you can fill out the technical information and get the advice offline while still being in a commercial accelerator. And it depends. If you know that you need to understand your customers and you need to understand how to develop a process to move forward and actually reach out to them, talk to them, a commercial accelerator is the best. And I rate Imagine H2O as the best out there for something for later early stage companies. Is very. I think it's, once you're out of AquaHacking, you're probably ready for an Imagine H2O. And I've been part of 4 Imagine H2O cohorts in various capacities for companies that I've worked with. And I think that the connections that you get out of those are amazing, because you can talk to clients, you can talk to end users, you can talk to investors and find the right partners. And then there's a bunch of other local accelerators. It's understanding how to do business development in the general perspective is what you need. There are great accelerators like a Mars or Communitech, and there's tons of those, at least all over Ontario, which it seemed like most of the people who were on early were from, and then they have them all over the country. I think Alberta Innovates is one of them, and so it's a question of what do you need when, and I would recommend getting as much advice as early as possible. It's going to take a long time, so you don't have to do everything all at once. Cool. So I like to call this the potential path of least resistance in an ideal world. And this is likely a multi-year process. So when you're a concept, going to a group like AquaHacking and helping take that concept or something that's a little bit beyond a concept really to market, looking at research, looking at pilots and refining value. Because value is such a big thing to ultimately sell, especially once it passes those thresholds. And really at the start, you're kind of selling a dream, because it's generally an unproven technology. Even if it's a better mousetrap, it's still something that you have to convince people to do. And until they've actually done it, it's still very tough to get in front of them. And then once you have some early success, which may take 2, 3, 4 years, the next step is looking at things like Imagine H2O, Lyft, and one of my favorites is the Blue Tech Forum, where they're really a great place to look at how both technologies and business models are succeeding. So they have a competition at their forum for 14. I think it's about 14 technologies that are early stage, and they look at which is the most innovative technology and which one has the best go-to-market strategy. And a big part of it is, and is anyone here old enough to know about Betamax or 8-track tapes? So competing tech. So, yeah, I'm not old enough to actually know about them, but I've heard of them. So they were all better technologies, but they had worse go-to-market strategies. And even though we're in a highly technical field, the best technology doesn't always win out. But the best go-to-market strategy usually does. So it's one thing to have a great tech side, and my assumption, because I'm not very technical, is that when people are talking to me about tech, that the tech does what they say it does. Then it's all about business strategy and how to focus that. So yeah, a bit about that. So usually when you're at that stage, you also need to look at what investment do you need. The general advice that I would give is always ask for more money than you need, because it runs out a lot quicker than you think it will. And then you're not just refining value, you're demonstrating it. You're able to sell use cases or case studies. And at that point, you should be developing processes. So the key, once you have the technology and it's working in the market, is how do you sell it and how do you find the right clients? And you could go talk to every utility in the world, but that takes a lot of time and effort. So you really want to talk to the right utility. So if it's a size thing, a technical aspect, like if you can find out what questions lead you to, these are the best clients for me. So I'll go back to Sentry. When I start talking to people about Sentry, when I'm working with them, it's the best clients for Sentry are those that want to identify toxic shock or optimize their aeration process. So they can do a lot of other things, but those are their best clients. And people can either say, that's me or that's not me very easily. And it saves everyone a lot of time, because we only have so much time in a day, and so we don't want to be presenting to everyone. And so once you start to develop that process, you've got the success, then it's early growth. So looking at regional demonstration funds, and I have some examples later on, to go to other places beyond your home region. And then looking at global award grants like the Imagine H2O Urban Water Challenge or Imagine H2O Asia that help you get further abroad. Or groups like IL Utilities, who help get technologies that have been deployed successfully in front of other utilities or industrial users. And then you can start selling into new places. You should be process driven. And then the key is to really have steady growth, and that's becoming a standard practice. Any questions on this slide? Where does everyone feel like they are within this sort of a concept to startup area?
Yep.
Cool. And so just a couple of things. So, if you're a research project, I always say, build a team and a following. And here's a book I recommend if you haven't read Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman. It's one of the most funny and interesting books. He was a physicist who worked with NASA and things like that. If you are a social enterprise, heart and effort will fuel success. And I recommend the book Give and Take by Adam Grant. No relation. But that's also very useful for business as well, where the most interesting thing is he talks about how when there's three types of people: givers, matchers, and takers. And the worst salespeople are givers, but also the best salespeople are as well. And it's all about how you approach things tactically and understand how to interact with folks. And if you're a company, compete where no one else is. And it's funny because Blue Ocean Strategy is it's a phenomenal book. And it's funny that it's AquaHacking because they talk about Cirque du Soleil in it because they found a new way to approach a similar market. So, the last part is there help? Yes, there's tons of help. And these are just the ones that, came to mind early on. There's thousands and thousands of all these groups. So there's tons of grants from, NRC IRAP. And if you haven't looked at these, they're easy to find out whether they're right for you at the right time. NRC IRAP has great grants. SDTC helps you prove out your technology. FCM, if you can save money for a municipality or save energy for a municipality, it's huge. The Canadian Water Network is great for supporting research. In terms of commercialization, it depends on your size, where you are, and what you're looking for. Everything from funding for pilots in different locations, technical advice, business support, or really export growth. There's tons of organizations out there. And if you ever have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share some thoughts on who to reach out to and make some introductions. And most of all, have fun. So yeah, that's a bit about that. I guess now it's time for questions. There's my email. Hit me up anytime. I mean, I'll get back to you if it's late at night or something like that, but. Yeah.
Thanks so much, John. I have some new books to add to my reading list now. I'm wondering, before we jump into some questions specifically from the alumni members, if you could chat a bit about your connection with AquaHacking, because you were involved a few years ago. Yeah, if you could just speak a bit about that.
So yes, so one of the companies that I joined Imagine, which was an AI company out of Kitchener-Waterloo. I joined, I think, 3 weeks before we competed in the final for AquaHacking, and it was great. And I thought it was incredibly useful. We were through that, we got grant funding, which we needed at the time, because as you know, when you're early stage, money is probably the biggest limiter. And we also got connected to a local utility who was able to give us a ton of information. For us at the time, data was what we needed. And he basically came with a thumb drive. We talked to him about some ideas, where we were headed, and he gave us information, and we were able to learn from that, and it really helped provide an early start, or an early kickstart. And yeah, it's so with Imagine, the exit was last year in around this time. I can't remember the exact date. Yeah, at the time I realized I didn't want to join the big company, and decided to consult for companies on my own, because driving to Kitchener took me a long time, and I had a new kid. So yeah.
Awesome.
And all because of AquaHacking.
We have 15 minutes left. So yeah, now's the time to ask questions. Yeah, I'll open up the floor.